If you were to pick up a copy of the Quran, you could be certain that what you have is exactly word for word what was revealed to Prophet Muhammad over 1400 years ago. But can we say the same about the Torah or even the Bible? And in fact, how do we know if any of these religious texts have been accurately preserved over the years? To answer these questions, let's examine the preservation of the three major religious scriptures, beginning with the most recently revealed, the Quran. The Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad over 23 years, starting in 610 CE until 632 CE, just a few months before his passing. The Prophet Muhammad is said to have been illiterate, meaning he could neither read nor write, and so he recited the revelations to his companions, who either memorized them or wrote them down. Arabs at that time took immense pride in their memory, with many able to easily memorize long passages word for word. As a result, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad would memorize the Quran as it was revealed. Additionally, the Prophet Muhammad encouraged his companions to transcribe the Quran, and so alongside memorization, the Quran was also written down during the Prophet's lifetime on materials such as parchment, palm leaves, and even bones. After the Prophet passed away, the first Caliph, Abu Bakr, took steps to compile the Quran into a single manuscript. Zayd ibn Thabit, one of the Prophet's trusted scribes, was tasked with leading this effort. He carefully cross-referenced memorized portions with written records to ensure complete accuracy. This compilation was safeguarded and later entrusted to Hafsa bint Umar, one of the Prophet's wives. As Islam spread to different regions, differences in dialects led to variations in Quranic recitation. To prevent confusion, the third Caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, commissioned an official standardized version based on the manuscript that was entrusted to Hafsa. A committee, again led by Zayd, transcribed the Quran in the Qurayshi dialect, as it was originally revealed. Multiple identical copies were then distributed to major Islamic centers such as Mecca, Medina, Kufa, Basra, and Damascus. To maintain uniformity, Uthman ordered that unofficial or dialectally variant manuscripts be burned, not to alter the Quran, but to ensure all Muslims recited from the same authentic version. Because the Quran was preserved through both oral transmission and written records, it remained safeguarded against loss or alteration. And this method of careful preservation has also been supported by modern findings. In 1972, a manuscript was discovered in the Great Mosque of Sana'a in Yemen. This manuscript, known as the Sana'a manuscript, contains some of the oldest Quranic text fragments in existence. After extensive research and analysis by scholars, it was found that the text in the manuscript is remarkably close to the modern Quranic text. Although there are some minor differences, for example, slight variations in word placement or diacritical marks, these do not alter the meaning or the text in any way. With both oral and written transmission carefully maintained, the Quran we have today is identical to what was revealed to Prophet Muhammad over 1400 years ago. Now that we've seen how the Quran was preserved with incredible accuracy, let's move on to the next major scripture, the Torah, which is the earliest of the three. The Torah consists of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Tanakh in Jewish tradition. The 5 books consist of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Torah is believed to have been revealed to Prophet Moses over 3,000 years ago. And according to Jewish and Islamic traditions, the Torah was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, where he received divine commandments from God. The Torah became the central religious text of the Israelites, guiding both their beliefs and laws. The Torah was originally passed down both orally and in written form. The Israelites memorized its teachings, and it was also recorded in written scrolls. However, unlike the Quranic tradition where memorization played a primary role in preservation, the Torah's written form was considered the primary method of transmission. One of the most significant events in the history of the Torah's preservation occurred during the destruction of Solomon's temple in the year 586 BCE. The Babylonians, led by King Nebuchadnezzar II, invaded Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and burned many Jewish religious texts. This event is believed to have resulted in the loss of the original Torah manuscripts. After the Babylonian exile, when the Israelites were allowed to return to Jerusalem, a Jewish scribe and priest named Ezra is credited with reconstructing the Torah. According to some traditions, the original Torah was lost or corrupted during this time, and Ezra either rewrote it or restored it from memory, with divine guidance. One of the earliest references to this idea comes from the book of 4 Ezra, a Jewish text written after the destruction of the Second Temple. It describes how Ezra dictated the Torah to scribes after receiving divine inspiration. This suggests that the Torah, in its written form, needed to be reconstructed after being lost. Early Christian scholars like Irenaeus supported this idea, saying that Ezra restored the scriptures. Some rabbinic sources also acknowledge his role, but they describe it more as editing and standardizing the Torah, rather than rewriting it completely. So some historical and religious perspectives suggest that Ezra restored the Torah, while others suggest that he edited or rewrote parts of it. After Ezra's compilation, the Torah was accurately copied by Jewish scribes known as sophrim. Over the centuries, strict copying rules were developed to ensure accuracy, such as counting words or letters to prevent mistakes. However, despite these efforts, variations arose due to manual copying, occasional errors, and differences in interpretations. As a result, slight differences appeared in various Torah scrolls over time. Additionally, the Torah has been translated and copied into different languages, such as Greek and Aramaic, leading to further textual variations. In 1947, a major discovery shed light on the Torah's textual history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in caves near the Dead Sea, contain ancient Hebrew texts, including portions of the Torah dating back to around 300 to 100 BCE. Scholars compared these scrolls to modern Torah manuscripts and found that while the core message remained consistent, there were some variations in wording and phrasing. These differences suggest that while the Torah was preserved with care, variations emerged over time due to manual copying, translations, and different interpretations. But despite these challenges, religious communities take great efforts to maintain and preserve the Torah and pass it down through generations. Now that we have explored the Torah's history, let's move on to the Bible, the final of the 3 major religious scriptures. Of all 3 major religious scriptures, the history of the Bible is the most complex. The Bible consists of 2 main parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is a collection of religious texts that overlaps with the Hebrew Bible. It includes the Torah, which consists of the first 5 books, detailing the laws, teachings, and early history of the Israelites. The New Testament is a collection of 27 books in the Christian Bible that focuses on the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It includes the Gospels, which tell the story of Jesus' life and teachings, the Acts of the Apostles, which describes the early church's formation and spread, the Epistles, offering guidance and teachings to early Christians, and Revelation, a prophetic book about the end times and the final victory of good over evil. Christians believe that the New Testament was revealed after Jesus' ministry, while the Old Testament was already established in Jewish tradition. So how were these testaments preserved? The Old Testament was passed down through handwritten manuscripts, much like the Torah. However, the New Testament was written in Greek, decades after Jesus' time. Unlike the Quran, which was memorized and written down immediately, or the Torah, which had scribes maintaining strict copying rules, the New Testament was written by multiple authors over several years. The 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written between 40 to 100 years after Jesus. These accounts were based on oral traditions, eyewitness testimonies, and earlier written sources. Because Christianity spread quickly across different regions, copies of the Bible were made by hand and translated into different languages, including Latin, Coptic, and Syriac. However, this manual copying process introduced textual variations over time, much like the Torah. This was actually one of the biggest challenges in the preservation of the Bible, the presence of many different versions. Because early Christians copied the Bible by hand, errors, additions, and omissions occurred. Some of the key variations include different manuscripts. The Bible's earliest surviving manuscripts date back to around the 2nd and 3rd century CE, long after Jesus' time. The oldest complete copies, Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, show notable differences from later versions. These differences happen because the Bible was copied by hand, leading to human errors. Scribes sometimes made mistakes like misspellings or skipping words. Sometimes there were also intentional changes. Some scribes modified passages to clarify meaning or align with their beliefs. Since none of the original Bible exists today, scholars rely on these ancient manuscripts to reconstruct the original wording. However, because manuscripts differ, pinpointing the exact original version is difficult. Over centuries, scholars have compared manuscripts to determine the most accurate version, leading to multiple Bible translations today. Some verses in modern Bibles are missing from the earliest manuscripts, meaning they were likely added later. For example, the story of the adulterous woman in the Gospel of John is absent from the oldest manuscripts. It was likely added later to emphasize Jesus' message of mercy and forgiveness. These additions may have happened because scribes wanted to clarify teachings, reinforce theological beliefs, or preserve oral traditions. Over time, these changes made it harder to determine the Bible's original wording. Christian denominations use different versions of the Bible due to historical and theological differences. The Protestant Bible has 66 books, the Catholic Bible includes 73 books with 7 additional books, and the Eastern Orthodox Bible contains even more books than the Catholic Bible. These differences arose over centuries as Christian groups debated which books should be included. Since the Bible has been translated into many languages over centuries, differences in wording and interpretation have led to multiple versions. These variations can significantly impact how certain verses are understood. Some words in the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek don't have direct equivalents in other languages. Translators must choose words that best fit the context, but this can sometimes alter the original meaning. For example, the Hebrew word Sheol, often meaning grave or underworld, is translated as hell in some versions and the grave in others, leading to different theological interpretations. Also, some translations reflect the beliefs of those who translated them. In some cases, translators added, removed, or changed words to align with their theological views. For example, in 1 John 5:7, the King James Version includes the phrase, "For there are 3 that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these 3 are one." However, this phrase does not appear in the earliest Greek manuscripts, and is believed to have been added later to support the doctrine of the Trinity. Different translations influence how Christian teachings are understood by different groups. Some denominations prefer certain translations because they align with their doctrines. For example, Catholics use the Reims Bible, while many Protestants prefer the King James Version. Because translations affect meaning, no single version of the Bible can claim to be the exact original. Unlike the Quran, which has remained unchanged in both oral and written form, or the Torah, which was meticulously copied by scribes following strict preservation rules, the Bible has undergone many textual variations over the centuries due to manual copying, translations, and editorial changes. However, despite these variations, Christian communities have worked hard to preserve and pass down the Bible for generations, making it one of the most widely read and studied religious texts in history. Each of these religious scriptures has undergone different processes of preservation. Learning about their history helps us understand their importance and how they have been preserved over time.